Hello, and welcome to a Bon Mott's production of
MOTSterpiece Theatre,
where we review critically acclaimed cinema spanning the breadth of human filmmaking.
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Spoilers, mature content, inappropriate language. Join us.
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of MOTSterpiece Theater. Today we are talking about the classic, somewhat legal piece,
semi-paralegal,
To Kill a
drama.
Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird, and because of that, we've got our resident legal expert Geoff back on the show.
How's it going?
So, and joining us as well are Ian Manzer.
Hello.
And Scott Thurlow.
Hey there.
And I am Steve-O. So, I guess we're going to start off with a funny log line from Ian.
My girl, SVU.
Boom, 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 boom.
Da, 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 da. All right. and I am going to just do a short synopsis of the film. So, it starts off with these kids running around. Actually, I think it starts on a shot of Scout, who is, I guess, the main character.
She's the narrator,
she's the
at
one
least.
she's the narrator and the one that is kind of focused on throughout this. We see this through her eyes. Just real quickly, they meet a incredibly annoying kid who's in town for like 2 weeks, who
For like a summer vacation.
gets them to go see Boo Radley, and that will become important later, like much, much later. Anyway, as it turns out, their father, Atticus, has, by there I mean Scout and her brother Jim, their father, Atticus, has gotten a case defending a local black man named Tom Robinson. He's accused of raping a white woman in town. I forget what her first name was.
Mary Lou.
May Ellen.
Yule. Yeah,
Some
May Ellen
Southern
Yule.
Belle name.
May Ellen. Sorry.
Sure.
May Ellen.
There is a lot of, I guess, hand-wringing that happens throughout, not amounting to all that much. A crazy mob comes to try and kill Tom Robinson while he's in jail at one point, but they don't get past Atticus and his hero kids or whatever. And then there's the actual trial, which is, I know Ian will say it's the most important and best part of the movie, which I would probably tend to agree with. After the trial goes on for a while, it becomes very obvious that Tom Robinson did not commit the crime, and in fact, most likely, her own father beat the hell out of her and then blamed it on Tom. Despite that, he is found guilty and is, as they're taking him back to another jail for safekeeping, he escapes, runs away, and is killed by, I guess, one of the sheriff's deputies. So that's all. Sucks. And then Boo Radley comes back because drunk old man Yule tries to kill the kids while they're walking through the woods.
The father of the
Right.
woman who is
The father of
accusing Tom.
right.
And was abused by her own father.
It's the best synopsis ever.
He attempts to kill the children, specifically while Scout is wearing a ham costume that looks nothing like ham.
Unimportant.
Let the record show that it looks nothing like ham.
Unimportant.
But it says
detail.
ham on it, so you know that it's ham.
Objection. Irrelevant.
They are saved by Boo Radley, who is Robert Duvall, and that's pretty much the end of the movie.
Yes.
And they learn a lesson.
I guess
About
they learn a
prejudice.
lesson. Yes.
Sure.
So then we're going to move on to me, with the introduction. So basically, I described it briefly just now, but I'll
Sure.
go a little bit more in
It's
depth.
about exactly
at
what
this
you
point.
said in the synopsis. Like, go ahead.
There's not too much. I think we're saying that the introduction goes up to the point where Atticus gets the case.
Judge comes to see him and tells him that he's assigned to defend Tom Robinson.
Yeah.
I think it's about a half hour, 40 minutes into the film.
Probably about 35, yeah. Whatever.
Yeah,
Sure.
About that.
Roughly.
Scout and Jim are kind of hanging out, playing, being kids.
Being children.
I think they even meet the... Do we meet the Dill,
Yes.
their little annoying
Yeah.
friend, before we meet Atticus?
Yeah. No, slightly after.
I think, yeah, that's right. There's a scene with Atticus, and then he goes off to work, and then we meet Dill.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just like kids getting into shenanigans for the most part in the beginning of this. You're my girl. I think is pretty accurate there.
It's a coming-of-age tale. And I hadn't seen this movie in a very, very long time. And I remembered the trial scenes from this. I didn't realize that the maybe 40 minutes total of the trial scenes were padded with kind of a hokey, like, coming-of-age tale. Little rascals, but not as offensive as like that. But like that kind of... It's like having My Girl, which I think is an appropriate description for this, but inserting a law piece in the middle of this.
Yes, I mean,
like you flip the channel, watched Law and Order for a little while, and then flip back to the end of My Girl. It is.
That's pretty accurate. It felt like that, yes.
And the intro is all the setup for that coming of age tale, which doesn't really appeal much to me. And what it appeals to, who it appeals to, will come in later in my discussion. But
sure,
yeah.
But that is what the cutoff
Hamlers.
for the intro is for sure. At least we agree upon that. What do you think?
Yeah, it was... It's oddly does not set up the law part of this very well, I would say.
They mention that Atticus is a well-respected and known lawyer, and he's a good lawyer.
They do set up Atticus all right, but the kids getting into their shenanigans and like being scared of Boo Radley and wandering around the town doesn't really have much to do with what's going on with Tom Robinson in town.
Playing kick the can and rolling with the tire, like
Sure.
I don't know. It didn't work for me.
It's just, I mean, I think it's supposed to like bookend the trial with with the life of kids in this town. You know, I don't know if I'm going to give the intro one, but I guess I'll turn it over to you guys at this point.
Well, I thought it did a good job of setting up who Atticus Finch is, and as ostensibly the pivotal character. I'm not going to say he's the protagonist necessarily, because I think that is more supposed to be Scout, even though she's not an active character. But I think it did a good job of setting up who he is, and you know, he has a conversation with Scout about, you know, Mr. Cunningham is poor. Are we poor? Yeah, we're poor too.
Yeah.
It just the stock. This is set in 1932. The stock market crash was 4 years prior.
It's like the backdrop.
Yeah, and he says, you know, the crash hit them far worse than it hit us, and that, I think this will tie more into themes later on. But I think part of what the intro was doing is showing us the town and who the sort of in-group people are and who the out-group people are. The Radleys are clearly an out-group, as are the entire population of black people, who we never even meet in the intro, as far as I can remember.
You don't really meet anyone having to do with the trial until the body
or time
until the judge shows up.
See, I absolutely agree with you. And I think thematically, the introduction does a great job of setting up like the circumstances of the town they live in and the era that they're in. Just narrative-wise, how I judge films, I don't think it was particularly engaging. I don't find coming-of-age stories, they don't like appeal to me as an audience.
I'm already of age.
Yeah, and that's what it was setting up as. Like, here are the friends I'm going to have over the course of my life. Here are the course of my youth. Here are the challenges I'm facing growing up in this environment. And there are a couple of interesting like pieces that come up through it, but over the course, I just wasn't invested in any of the characters. And Atticus Finch, who's an interesting and pivotal character, as you mentioned, you're since your point of view is the kids, you're an outsider, seeing this kind of mythical figure almost. Who is outside of your direct daily, and I'm not interested in the kids. I'm interested in Atticus Finch, and I'm going to give this a 0.
Sure, I think you might have convinced me, because going into it, I was going to give it a 1, but then we sort of quickly precast brought up something that we'll delve into probably just shortly down the line. But I think that may be the thing that convinces me to give the intro a 0, even though I thought it was fine overall. But you're right, like. It's weird because you're supposed to be following Scout and Jim, I guess, but Atticus is by far the more interesting character, and you want to be following him. But because it's told through their eyes, you don't see as much of him as perhaps you might like to. And yeah, like the dramatic setup, if you will, in quotes, is when he gets assigned Tom Robinson's case. But that's not till the very, like, again, like you said, like 40 minutes into the film. So the rest of it is basically them dicking around, being like, Boo Radley's a boogeyman. But that doesn't really come into play till much later. So
And almost unnecessarily so.
Almost. But all I'm saying is, like, I think you convinced me that it's probably more of a 0 than I thought it was. And I probably will end up giving the intro a 0 at this point.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the 0.
I'm going to be the odd man out. I liked the intro. I thought it did what I was wanting it to do.
Right. Like, I can see that too, Jeff, for sure. Just, I don't know. Like Ian said, narratively to me, that's all.
Right. I want to make my case a little bit that we are seeing the movie through Scout's eyes in the same way that we're seeing, Gatsby from the point of view of
Nick's eyes, I think.
Nick.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was Googling quickly to try and find the name of the character. And we're seeing her and setting up setting up what her image of her father is. And spoiler alert, down the road we're going to see him fail at doing what he does, but in her eyes he's set up as this sort of mythical kind of character,
sort of like a Shane kind
anybody's
of thing.
father would be.
I was just going to bring that up. We recently reviewed Shane, which actually has the exact same kind of setup there. You're seeing the character Shane through the eyes of a child, and to the point where he is mythologized,
idolized.
He views him as the embodiment of the Western ideal. Here, it's sort of I don't feel that Atticus Finch's character is ever challenged in the right way of how a person who has that coming of age story where they kind of lose faith in their idols. That is, you brought up that he failed. Yeah, he failed at the trial, but he never lost. I don't think he ever lost that purity to him in the eyes of his children.
Sure.
And I don't know if the message then is.
Like, I get that, but that might be for a question down the line. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But
I'm still going to probably stick with a soft 0, but probably still 0. But I see your point, Jeff, for sure. I could have, like I said, going into this, I may have given it 1, but I think I sort of convinced myself and got convinced that it's weaker than I thought it was. Even though it was, like, fine overall, just not as strong.
Gotcha.
All right, so I think we're going to go, Jeff, you're the only one on that, and we're going to go to body with Scott.
All right, so as we said, the impetus is Atticus being assigned the defense lawyer for Tom Robinson's being accused of raping Mary Ellen, whatever her name is. So, but the thing is, it takes a year for, maybe Jeff can speak upon this. It's a while until they actually go to trial. He's sort of like gathering his information. He goes to Tom Robinson's house. That's the first time I believe we see like that section of town, like the black population where they are and where their situation is. And at that time as well, I believe he brings his children with him at their insistence to do that. So while he's talking to Tom,
but they're asleep through the whole thing.
Like they sort of like get creepily accosted.
Except for
like one of these stereotypical old white racist denizens of the town.
Oh man,
I think it's you, old man
It is
Yule,
Yule
yeah.
himself. Okay, he accosts them and creepily I don't know, just creepily creeps around their car.
Comes into the car, says like 4 words, and then wanders away back into the woods.
But I guess it's implied that he's drunk as well and like just being his racist douchebag self. So anyway, it goes through that, like the kids go to school and it's shown that Scout is a tomboy previously set up, gets into a couple fights. Like it's sort of all the stuff that's contained in the film, but how is it like adding to the narrative, I guess is what I want to get to. But the thing is that as we also sort of agreed precast, that the courtroom scene is like one of the pivotal, if not the like highlight scene that the entire courtroom procedure. So because it's contained in the body, I'm probably going to give it a 1 just because of that, because that was also like, I'll speak about it later, but I think has some of the best dialogue as well. But that's sort of the pivotal, like confrontation, like comes to a head, climax, if you will. And it contains much of the themes as well. So like almost everything is encapsulated in that section, which is in the body. And then I believe we call the cutoff where even though Atticus, quote unquote, loses the trial, like Tom Robinson is still found guilty by, of course, the, again, racist yokels who are in town. And ends up trying to escape from his prison transport and is gunned down because he's trying to escape. And it seems like it's heavily implied, of course, if not outright, like convey to the audience that he's desperate and that he feels it's the only thing he could do at the time. So I get that, and that's possibly more like prescient than ever, perhaps unintentionally by the film. But I'm saying is because all that's contained in the body, I'll probably give it a solid to strong 1, purely because of that fact.
So you're, I probably agree with you on that. I like the courtroom scene the best, and was the best scene in the film, I think. A lot of heavy dialogue and good,
and well written
speech making, basically. Yeah, that was well done. The Tom or Atticus finding out that Tom died trying to get away was really a good heavy scene as well.
Exactly.
And all that being said, I would agree. I felt like a lot of the other going to school and getting into fights and stuff like that was kind of supposed to be.
Maybe?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess it's set up for the bookend parts of this film where we go back to talking about Boo Radley and all that stuff.
But you can't make the majority of your film be the bookend for. It's like slicing large pieces of bread and saying, "Oh, look what a big sandwich I made." Like, no, it's mostly bread and there's one piece of meat in there. And although I do think
like
the courtroom
metaphor.
scenes are fantastic. It's just that I wasn't taken in by what is the majority of the film, which is the coming of age story.
Well, as far as the body goes, I think I'm probably going to give it a 1 because I enjoyed that courtroom scene. I enjoyed the things that were going on around the Robinson family and Tom himself. And to some extent, I enjoyed I enjoyed watching the story of the kids. I just think it had not much to do with what was going on in the courtroom scene and the trial, which is kind of what everybody remembers about this movie and thinks about when they think about To Kill a Mockingbird. They think about that trial.
I'm going to push back a little bit again. Because I do enjoy the coming of age story that's being told here, and the fact that a lot of the stuff that's set up in the intro starts to pay off in the body when Scout has her bit of active engagement and helps her father in basically diffusing a mob because she has this.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's a good scene as well.
She has this attitude of all these people they encounter that she's encountered. She just accepts them for who they are, and it's that the Cunninghams are poor, is not something that defines them. So when she sees Mr. Cunningham in the crowd that's come to lynch Tom, she just starts talking to him about, hey, do you remember me? I go to school with your son, and blah blah blah.
Tell your kid, hey.
And without the earlier scene of the fight between her and the Cunningham son, because she was trying to simply matter-of-factly explain why he wasn't able to have lunch. I thought tied in very well with her character being so open and accepting of everybody that it's sort of there's the intolerance of the mob and Scout's just childlike acceptance of everyone as they are, not realizing that society really wants her to be somewhere in the middle.
True. It's good. It's a nuanced point.
So I'm giving it a 1. Particularly, I also like the court scene.
I absolutely see the point of view you're going with that, and I think that is one of the more powerful scenes in the film when she what is it, truth from the mouth of babes moment. However, it's just my point of view on this is, I'm not saying it was badly done coming of age story. I'm just saying that it didn't work for me, and that's not. I'm not saying that that it was again. It's not a bad coming of age story. Just I don't enjoy this type of films, and I can't judge it objectively in this case because of I guess it'll go more into style for this, but from the fact that it almost is like 2 movies at this point, where they just divert to the trial scene, which seems out of place in the rest of the film. Because the majority of the film, and as you point out, most people remember the trial scene, Steve-O, but the trial scene is such a small segment of this film that the rest of it's a majority of it a good, healthy majority of it is the coming of age thing, and I didn't really connect with me.
I guess I see what you're saying, but I think the most important and most impactful scenes are like the two ones you just said. And yes, while the coming of age stuff like was there, I guess it didn't like negatively affect me as much as it seems to have you, E, specifically. Difficult to describe like why that is the case, because normally I'd be the one on your side, like sort of saying the same thing myself. But I think it's outweighed by like I said, the impact and the importance of those other scenes that were sort of like, elevated or highlighted above everything else. And I thought the coming age stuff, like I said, was okay. It was fine. It was there, but I think it sort of needs to be there, like to hold the rest together. So all I'm saying is like it's enough for me to give the body a 1.
Oh, I'm giving it a 1 as well.
All right.
No.
And I guess as the resident attorney, I can't let the body go by without talking about how they handle the courtroom scene. And I have to say, I've seen this movie before, and I just haven't seen it in a little while. And the courtroom scene is, I thought, very well done. They, for the most part, follow the way testimony is given and that kind of stuff. And save for while Atticus Finch is cross-examining the victim, he has this digression where he tosses Tom a glass, and Tom catches it with his right hand and then explains that his left hand does not work. In reality, it's a bit of poetic license. In reality, you wouldn't have the defendant basically being asked questions in the middle of the victim's cross-examination. I think part of the reason that the courtroom scenes stand out so well is, I mean, Gregory Peck is brilliant.
Yes.
And well, we'll get to that, a lot of this stuff in dialogue, but his delivery and the words that he's given are incredibly powerful, and some of them I forget came from this of do your duty and the we'll get to it in dialogue, but
sure. But it's there in that scene. Yeah,
it's there in the body, and I want to give it a nod. I don't know that Tom would have taken the stand. There's the Fifth Amendment. You don't have to testify at your trial. And I guess to tie this back into 12 Angry Men and the discussion we had before, Atticus is appointed as his public defender, basically. Mm-hmm. Except this is in 1932, which is well before Gideon v. Wainwright said you have to have a public defender, or you have to have a trial. You have to have an attorney when you're charged with a crime. Mm-hmm. At the time, and this was set in the 1932, I think. I
believe, yeah.
And in 1932, a case came out that said you have to have an attorney in a capital trial. Mm-hmm. So because he's being charged with rape and could maybe get the death penalty, I'm not real sure.
It was sort of implied that might be the case. They never said it, though, outright.
Right. So I think that's why he's given an attorney.
Right.
The case that was the case from 1932 that imposed that rule involved 9 black men who were accused of raping a white woman, and the judge appointed as their attorneys a real estate broker and a retired attorney who hadn't practiced in years, and the Supreme Court said,
"I don't think so.
You can't do that." And I found it coincidental that this movie is set in 1932. Sure. That case came out in 1932. I don't know if there's a connection there. I would assume that if you maybe went back into Harper Lee's research for the film,
perhaps
found something out about that.
It might have been connected. But so I'm definitely giving the body 1, and I very very much enjoyed the courtroom scene.
Yeah. I give it a 1 as well. I think everybody else said 1 as well, right?
Yep.
All right, so we're going to move on to conclusion with Ian.
After a very satisfying conclusion to the film, they add on another half an hour, which involves almost a third movie involved, which a child walking around in a costume that has to have ham written on it, so you know it's supposed to be ham.
And she narrates it well. She lampshades it, if you will.
Them being attacked by the drunk father, Atticus's
an unseen
kids.
assailant, but it turns out to be him.
The drunk father of the victim in the trial, who is implied to have been the one to actually abuse his daughter, and basically Robert Duvall playing a Mice and Men or Sling Blade comes out and saves the kids, and everyone learns a heartwarming lesson that the Addams Family is
Lurch is a hero.
Lurch is a hero. It is laughably absurd. Like, I couldn't stop giggling at the ham.
The ham was hilarious.
The ham of it
I'll
all.
give you that.
If beyond the literal costume.
Her eyes sticking out of the slits to see.
Sure.
It is the stupidest thing I've seen in a film in a very
It was a
long
very
time.
odd and bad decision. The thing is, I said to you guys while we were watching, like, I don't remember that like being like the scene described in the novel, but it could very well have been. It just, of course,
With
when
the
you-
ham thing.
Yes, when you put it on film, then it becomes, of course, like you said, Ian, like ridiculously absurd, like a fucking Monty Python thing or something. So like it takes away a lot of the tension. Like, you know, you're supposed to feel like they're in danger, but she's being attacked dressed as a ham, so it's bizarre. And like the thing is, I'm gonna also like slightly counter you that, yeah, I see why you say like the Boo Radley thing seems sort of tacked on, like, and don't judge a book by its cover because he's a good guy too, and even though you think he's the boogeyman, he's like a neighborhood boogeyman. But that's sort of like one of the like core points. Like it shares the thread with the Tom Robinson like prejudice racism thing, at least on the surface.
In the novel, perhaps.
Yes, I know what you're saying. So
In the movie,
it does feel a bit
they
tacked on.
If they're trying to juggle these different plot lines, they're dropping
It's
balls
al-
left and right.
I'll give you this example. I'll move on. I'll let you guys speak after this, but it's almost like a G.I. Joe thing. Like, remember, kids, like, creepy people could be heroes too, essentially. G.I. Joe. And the end. So, like, I get that, but I still think it's fine enough. So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
The ham does undercut the
Exactly.
the tying up of the themes in the film.
It was a poor choice.
At the same time, if she were walking to this play with a, you know, really intricately made ham costume, then the problem would be, wait, how's this girl in the 1930s like making this
or anything
intricate...
else, or just don't have it at all, really, but...
All right.
You know what I mean?
Not sure why she had a ham.
It's easily solved
I
by
guess-
not having a costume at all.
Right. And it does, you know, when they're being attacked, it does, you know, undercut it significantly that she's
Exactly.
looking out of this little cutout of a ham costume, and she's like stuck in there, and her, you know, and the whole thing is someone's stolen her dress for reasons that are never
And
She
I
lost
addressed.
it.
So it's
But whatever.
but it seems the point of the ham costume was so that her vision was obscured, so she
She couldn't
really
see who was saving
see
her.
what was going
Like, I get
on.
that, but
I guess, but that
you could have done that without having that.
that's what I was
Exactly.
gonna say. But that's ridiculous.
Yes.
However, Jeff, maybe you're about
Well,
to say what I'm gonna
anyway,
say.
if I set aside the ham costume and all of that, I very much like the ending. The problem is that you're so taken out of the film by the inherent comedy
Absurdity of it, yeah.
of the image, that I have to give it a soft 0 because you are just laughing through them getting attacked by a drunken maniac, and you really shouldn't be. So I can't.
Yeah, I think that got me. I think you guys both convinced me over there that I was going to give it a soft 1, but I think that pushes it over the edge. And because it feels more tacked on than originally, like, probably what maybe was intended, definitely versus a novel, like, for sure. So I think, yeah, it tapers off kind of oddly, and like I said, it ends with like a random, like, not a random, but like an oddly like inserted PSA, where the intent, the theme was already obvious before that. So
I'll give it credit for this. It is a narrative closure to what's her name, Scout's story. The problem is I never bought into her narrative to begin with.
sure, and that's always going to be an
And
issue.
so-
yeah,
But it is like, if you want to, it rounds out her plot line very well.
That's
So-
that's actually what I was going to bring up. I might
Mhm.
give this. I think I'm probably going to give this a soft 1 because hams aside,
you guys got me. Go ahead, Steven.
I think that it does do a decent job of tying up her story specifically and like the kid's story overall, and it does bring closure to the Boo Radley thing. Now, there's something possibly to be said for if Boo Radley just didn't exist in this
Mhm.
movie at all, would it have made any difference really? But despite that, Boo Radley does exist. He's in the movie, and I like Duvall's like short appearance at the end, and
Sure.
I know you guys like thought that he was kind of laughable as like a lurch.
No, he was
but
fine. It just
Yeah.
resembled.
I
that.
thought he was all right. And I thought that, like you said, everything kind of got tied up with the story that we had begun on or with in the intro.
Sure, I guess you're right. Like it's almost if you double like reverse soul rolled me in a sense, because you're right. It is narrative closure, and that's something we've come to like sort of agree upon as a scale of how to judge the intro body conclusion overall. So because it does bookend itself, even though it feels like you're right. I remember the Boo Radley thing being much bigger part of the novel. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, because I just don't remember it as clearly. But because it's there, and because it's supposed to like sort of like close the circle, if you will, I think it does do that. So I may switch to a soft 1 for the conclusion.
Well, I'm continuing with a 0 on it.
All right. 0 as well, Jeff?
I could have gone either way, but I think I may settle on a very, very softest of all ham ones. So.
A hammy 1?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to bring us to themes with Jeff.
I think the overall theme, and I've mentioned it already, is of acceptance and tolerance. You have
or lack thereof.
Right. You have the kids have their boogeyman in Boo Radley, and the adults clearly have their boogeyman in Tom. And like I was saying before, Scout starts the movie with this attitude of accepting everybody as they are.
Sort of at face value,
right?
Pretty much, yeah.
And she, during the court scene, kind of has that crushed for her because she's seeing her father, who she worships in the way 10-year-old kids do. And she sees this guy Tom, who her father has just proven essentially did not do what he's been accused of doing, and yet the town or the 12 white jurors don't go along. And so she has her worldview kind of broken at that point. And then Boo Radley, her boogeyman, coming back and saving her and her brother, I think, and her acceptance of him reestablishes it for her. So I thought, while yes, what we do remember is the courtroom scene, the rest serves that theme, and it's Scout's story that we are following. We never see Atticus without Scout. I think it does a very good job of telling us Scout's story and her journey with regard to that theme. So
no, I pretty much agree. I don't have much more to say. I think theme is probably an easy one to give, like one of the strongest things contained in this film. And while that's obvious, I think they handled it very well. And that's sort of, again, it's always been the point of the novel, and I think the film at least did a good job of adapting and portraying that aspect, so I'll give it a 1.
I thought there was an interesting thing about cultural relativism,
okay.
Especially brought up in the trial during Atticus' final speech to the jury, where he's talking about how the idea of a white woman trying to seduce a black man, you can't, it's not something that is ethically objective. That idea is all built on culture, and that is that the courts can actually break down and they're not and it makes it, it's not perfect, but there's that opportunity to break down those kind of cultural barriers
and stuff,
there. And it's actually still really a taboo if you look at a lot of film today, where you don't often see a black man and a white woman together. You'll see a white man and a black woman, but that's a very rare, and so it's the messages in this film still resonate today, even if it's not as extreme as it was depicted in the 1930s.
And perhaps that's the best evidence to give it a pretty strong 1.
I think that you guys all make good points. I think there's also something to be said in this other weird kind of theme of white people kind of patting themselves on the back for saving the black folks of this town. There's no black person in this movie that does anything active. It's all Atticus and Scout to some degree, saving Tom Robinson's life, and until he dies, and failing at saving his life, basically. I guess the one active thing that Tom Robinson even does is running away. It's off screen, and he gets killed for it.
It's just description,
right?
Sure.
I don't know if I want to. I don't know if that's a huge. Obviously, that wasn't a theme that anybody was going for when they were doing this movie.
Randomly pulled that out, but I get it. I see it.
But it is hey, look how progressive we are. because we're trying to save this guy, but they don't really give any of the black characters much characterization. They give Tom a little bit in the trial, but that's the only time you see him is when he's actively being indicted.
I think for me, what saves this from blindside territory is that A, it's set in 1932, so his attorney would be a white man, but also the fact that he fails. So in essence, the movie is saying nobody could help him.
Right.
He was set up,
but there is still that element of the white guy crossing the barrier and going into
a white man set them free,
right, and failed at it.
Sure, like I get it. So like, I don't know. I still think it's all enough for me to give it a 1, even though yes, you can sort of like read that aspect into it, Steve-O. I get that, and like we shouldn't celebrate that per se, but I think it's secondarily like it's almost I don't want to say Waldo-esque, but it's
it was definitely present.
I didn't think about it at the time, but now that you guys mention it in retrospect, sure, I can totally see it.
Atticus Finch's speech at the end, as I had mentioned previously, was full of that. Like,
he does call them out. That's true, but I don't think it was necessarily a detriment to this work, even though it kind of. I think the positive messages overwhelm whatever kind of self-aggrandizing is going on here.
That's kind of what I was going to say. Like, I enjoyed the themes of this film, even though there's problems with it. Of course, there's problems. It came out in the 50s,
62
or 62, so the early 60s. Like, yeah, there's issues, there's problems, but I think it was probably a damn step in the right direction at that point. And
sure,
I'll agree. As far as incremental progress goes, it was a pretty progressive theme at the time.
Yeah, I'll give it credit on that for sure.
So I'm going to give it a 1.
I think it's ones all around.
Ones all around. And that's going to move us on to antagonist with me.
Racism.
I know you're going to argue for racism. I'm going to say Old Man Yule is the antagonist.
Sure, because he embodies racism. Go on.
Sure, but he's a more concrete version of the antagonist here, and I would say at points he's horribly ineffective, and at points he's actually pretty damn effective at this. There's the two sides of the Old Man Yule coin.
Sure.
He's sometimes just seems like a bumbling idiot, and at other times he feels like he's like bubbling over
menacing,
with like racist hatred. So at the end of the day, I'm probably going to side closer to the one side, but I would certainly like to hear what you fine folks have to say about it.
No, actually, I think that's pretty well encapsulated. I would largely agree that yes, like we sort of agree that he embodies the racist attitude and mindset, at least time and place, and of course still even to this day. He can be somewhat of a caricature, I guess I'll say, but nevertheless, he still like is threatening in that sense. So because of that, I think he's effective. And yeah, just racism / prejudice / like the ingrained social taboos that we were brought up to arbitrarily buy into, as Atticus points out in his courtroom speech, I think are somewhat again like a more the nebulous antagonist, as I often bring up. But I think Yule, like of course, sort of embodies that, and I think he again, like I said, does a good job of portraying it within the story.
So the antagonist is the enemy in a sense, or the one who's bringing conflict to the protagonist. And for most of this, Yule has nothing to do with the kids, except for the very end when he decides to punish the children for the sins of the father, in a way, and take revenge on Atticus. And I think it was a left field turn.
Well, he's part of the crowd that gets stood down by Scout, right?
Yeah, he's like leading the lynch mob, if not.
Yeah, but his strength was always derived from the mass that was with him. He always had, like it says, the white wall of other yokels who backed him up. It was like even in the trial, it's he has his friends going up to the stand to kind of, or at least one of them, and then in the end he decides to take the action on his own and gets stopped by Lurch, but
yeah.
It's as ridiculous as I made it sound. But here's the thing is, I actually think that he does, in the weird left turn I think he makes, I think it's out of character, he does become the antagonist. and I think he was threatening throughout the entire thing. So I'll give it a 1.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1 too. He
The old 1 too.
Yes. I'm going to give it a 1 as well. He's menacing to the kids when they're in the car accompanying their father on one of his errands, even if, granted, he's in a drunken stupor when he does it.
They're still frightened by him.
They're still, to them, he's very intimidating.
Well, Scout's asleep, I think. But Jim is terrified.
I thought she woke up at one point.
Maybe.
I'm misremembering.
Either way.
Yeah, and his from almost the beginning from the beginning of the body, after Atticus is handed Tom as a client, he confronts Atticus coming out of the courtroom saying, You're not believing him over us, or over us.
Yeah.
And yeah, looking at it from today, and his ineptness, his ineptitude, undercuts it a bit. I'm going to give it a soft 1.
Sure.
But a 1 nonetheless.
All right. So that's 1s all around, right, for that?
No society or racism is a...
Like I said, yes, racism, prejudice as embodied
White people.
by him.
All embodied.
Of course it's nebulous, as always, but you can have a corporeal figure.
All right, so Scott, that's going to bring you to protagonist.
All right, so as we sort of alluded to and talked around, it's I would say it's Scout. If anyone disagrees, let me know. Perhaps the children, but she's like the focal point of that and the coming of age thing. But beyond that, how shall I describe it? It's difficult. I think she definitely is the protagonist, but it's because of the fact that, and as we said, not until the very end are they per se antagonized by the antagonist. So but she's learning, and as I think Jeff's pointed out, that she's learning that her worldview is not, the world is not as she sees it at the end of the day. Like, society is not the way that she thinks it is when she's confronted by a sort of an issue like that. So I still think she's fairly effective, and I think Jeff said that she was nominated for supporting actress at the time. So I think the little girl is pretty good. I'll speak about the other children perhaps in supporting, but I think she was solid enough, and that and because the framework is through her eyes, that you experience it all from her point of view, and I think it's, if not I'm sympathetic towards it. Like, it made sense, and as we said, it was narrative closure for her coming of age journey. So Ian clearly is chomping at the bit to say something. So
I mentioned earlier that I didn't buy into her narrative, and this is going to go in with a 0 straight away. But I feel like there's a very interesting story here, and they took perhaps the least interesting character out, and the most tertiary character to this interesting story, decided to follow their tale around this event. And again, I don't think it was. I think that she did a good job as an actress. And,
I get what you're saying,
but I just don't. Again, this is my personal belief. Not saying it's right or wrong, and just that it didn't work for me, and I can't give it a 1.
I got you. But let me ask you a question. Just you, specifically. Would you prefer then Atticus, I guess, to be the protagonist? Like, if not Scout, who would you want to follow?
I would actually like to have seen this as kind of an ensemble piece with following perhaps.
I get you.
What's Tom Robinson and Atticus Finch and a couple of the other characters, but this is neither here nor there. This is what we have, and it didn't work for me.
All right.
I'm going to make a case for Atticus being
overruled.
a protagonist, and here's why. Atticus is the only character in this film that I'm pretty sure that has, and I'd have to watch it again just to make sure, but that has scenes where Scout is not around. That you're still following a character.
Jim is with him in some of those scenes where Scout's not there.
There are points, especially at the court, especially at the courthouse. There's a scene where he's confronted by drunk old Manuel,
but they're there.
That they are not there. They have left already. They've already left. I paid very close attention to this because I had it specifically for this question. I wanted to figure out what was going on with this. There are a couple scenes where those kids, none of the kids are present, and you follow. They're usually at the end of scenes that the kids have been there, but the kids leave, and he is still wrapping things up with people. So the movie focuses on him in those scenes as well. Not only that, But I would also say that you get more of Atticus's personal, I don't want to say point of view, but you get the way that you understand the way that he feels about things.
Because he's explaining it to his children.
Exactly, as he imparts it onto them. Now, is that, I mean, you can make a case for that being you are following him through his giving these lessons to his kids. Granted, there are certainly things about Atticus in this movie that you're not privy to, but I think that a case could be made for him being the protagonist, and if that's the case, I'm definitely going to give protagonist a 1, which I think I'm going to, that for me, I'm going to count him as a protagonist.
I could see either of them being the protagonist. I think because
You could split it up, maybe, if you
yeah.
think so.
to my mind, since it's Scout's story, she's the protagonist, and she does play an active role at a couple of points, but they're fairly limited in scope.
Sure. They're few and far between, I guess.
Yeah, she in a weird way has her dad's back outside the jail.
Yeah.
And I'm having trouble just because she is not the most active of protagonists, giving it a strong 1. But because I also see Atticus as sort of
If you split them up
pair.
like 50-50 or 60-40 even, if you, in your mind they count both as protagonists, then I could see you giving a 1 because they're both strong enough combined.
well, they're certainly both strong enough combined. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm giving it a 1. I'm just having trouble articulating my feelings about Scout and the portrayal of her in the film.
I get that, for sure. I see that that point of view.
Okay. Atticus, on the other hand, I think is an excellent protagonist. He's just a little more ancillary to the arc of the story.
Right.
He's integral to the plot, but he's ancillary to the thematic arc of the story. So, so yes, I'm going to give it a 1.
I'm still giving it a 1 just on the basis of Scout. Although I like the argument, Atticus is going to be my number 1 supporting. I'll say because that's how I divided it in my mind. But if I'm still like, I see both your points. I'm sort of like splitting it down the middle of the road between those two extremes. That I will give it a 1 for Scout, even though I see like why you might waver if we're calling it just her. But I'm going to unfold Atticus to a different question and speak about that shortly.
And Steve?
I'm giving it a 1. Where'd you fall, Ian?
Oh, 0.
Yes.
All right. That means we're moving on to supporting with Ian.
Atticus Finch, best supporting character ever. Well, maybe not best supporting character ever, but
In this film.
in this film, he certainly is. And perhaps, like, I like Tom Robinson. He did a good job for what very limited screen time, but it made me very sympathetic towards him with what screen time he got. I really liked the disheveled victim who you could obviously tell is lying and
Or is
very
being
like emotionally.
She's telling a story she's been told by her drunken father.
Yeah, and also it's kind of I felt a little bit of I was rejected, so I'm going to like going to play just be as vicious as possible towards this person. There's a couple interesting supporting characters here, a lot of mediocre and a couple of really bad ones like
Just one.
Dill,
Him specifically.
Dill.
but. That's all from me. On to you guys.
I don't have much to say about it, but I agree that Atticus is by far and away, I'm calling him a supporting character, and he is by far and away the best supporting character. And Tom Robertson, yes, was quite good as well. Like you said, for little he was there, and like all the other townsfolk, I think rounded it out pretty well enough. Even if we count like Jim as a secondary, which I kind of do. But either way, I think they all deserve enough credit, and even if they didn't, Atticus carried the weight of it all. So.
Yeah,
or Gregory Peck.
I was going to say this feels like you're right, Ian. There were some bad. Well, specifically, Dill was pretty annoying, but like
just one.
Really,
but
just one.
But the town feels full, and I have to give that to like supporting characters.
Just one rebuttal to that. You said the town feels full, except it feels that Atticus Finch plays every single role in this town, like police officer.
No, there's a sheriff. The sheriff is a supporting character.
Yeah, but like he has to go and shoot the dog, the rabid dog.
That's true.
It does at times
and a
feel like a
completely
very
unnecessary
small
scene,
town,
I guess.
yeah.
But I get it. But
I don't know.
nevertheless,
It does feel like a small town, but it feels like it's populated with
believable characters.
believable
yes.
characters.
Yeah.
Like you said, like you guys both said, I like Tom Robinson. Yule, the guy that played Yule, did a fine job for the most part, and then sometimes he was just way overacting and ridiculous. But I take that as it comes. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty well done overall. In terms of supporting characters, I'm gonna give this probably a soft one because no one really stood out. Considering that I did not have Atticus as a supporting
Sure, it
character.
depends where you throw him into.
But I think probably a 1 nonetheless.
I'm definitely giving it a 1. I actually, as I was listening to you guys talking, Dill's character, as much as we hated Dill and found him annoying, I grew up with kids like that who were
Sure.
friends of mine that I just couldn't get rid of.
Nobody
like
could
they were
know
just
that character.
I guess we're friends and I'm stuck with you. I don't know how that happened. And
Now we're gonna go do all your terrible ideas.
right. So in a way, even Dill in his badness was a well-formed character.
He portrayed a good, annoying friend, I suppose, but that means he's still annoying.
And the fact that for most of the supporting characters, and again, I can't also include Atticus because I factored him in earlier.
Sure.
But I felt like I had a sense of who each of them were. Even I know who Jem is. I know who, to a certain extent, even Boo Radley is, and the judge who really only has one speaking scene. I get where he's coming from when he's giving the case to Atticus, and then after the verdict, he like storms out because I think the judge knows that this was bullshit.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'm definitely giving it a 1.
You say he knows it's bullshit, but the look on his face during the entire trial said, I don't give two shits about this.
Yeah, because it's a foregone conclusion to him.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, we talked about this last time. That
Yeah.
judges have seen everything already. And so getting invested in any of the cases, they know better. They don't.
Sure.
Great performance.
Again,
Brilliant performance.
the
Realistic.
judge is the easiest role to play because you don't
Just look
have
forward.
to give a shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm giving it a 1.
All right.
All right.
Is that ones all around?
I think so.
All right. Jeff, keep talking. About
We're on dialogue. Okay. I'm giving it a 1. Gregory Peck is fantastic in this. He gives at one point the monologue he gives after he learns that Tom has been killed. He gives like basically with his back to the camera, and yet it's still completely captivating. And his closing argument is excellent. I really can't think of a bad thing to say about the dialogue in this film. The kids seem like kids, at least in their dialogue. Some of them, their actual acting could have been bad. Their physical acting could have been better. But in their dialogue, I completely bought them. So it's getting a strong 1 from me.
I was somewhat wavering, but I was leaning towards a 1, at least my gut reaction coming out to it, just because of the strength of, like, yes, the courtroom scenes, and as you said, Atticus' like ending sort of exchange. But the rest of it, like, yes, they seem like kids, so maybe you guys can like convince me to change off from 1. But I think as I overuse the word serviceable, it was that, and it wasn't cringeworthy. At least I did not cringe. But the thing is, a la Shane and so forth, like a classic film that you have to take it with a grain of salt. I guess I want to say that
As a product of its time.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost like over stylized, like not quite Charlton Heston thing, but something like that. Like everyone's like sort of exaggerating, almost like a Jimmy Stewart film, but in a better way than a Jimmy Stewart film. At least I think a Jimmy Stewart film would be. So on the face of all that, I think it was perfectly fine overall. And the highlight scenes, the ones that I just said, I think definitely deserve a lot of credit on that front. They were very well written and certainly well portrayed, at least specifically by Gregory Peck and like Tom Robinson as well, his actor. So I think I'll probably give it if not soft, a solid 1 at the end of the day. Even though there were definitely weak like cracks in the overall dialogue, if you will, but it's not outweighed by the good stuff. So
My thoughts exactly. I'm
Yeah.
giving the same score.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I thought that the dialogue was good for most of it and great at certain points.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's exactly the same thing that all four of us have
There
said,
we
so
go.
not much more to say. It's ones all around.
Mhm.
And it's going to come to me for style. I actually enjoyed the cinematography of this movie, although I don't... Well, the cinematography I thought was good. I don't remember much of the soundtrack, if there was much of one.
birds. Like I'm being
if there
sort
e-
of serious.
If there even was like a score or anything.
There was
I-
no music.
I
though.
don't remember it.
I don't think.
So I
yeah,
can't,
there was music at times.
I can't speak to that. It was not
But then I don't
unmemorable,
remember
I
it
guess.
either,
But I don't know. Overall, I'll probably give style a 1, though. Well, maybe you're going to speak to this, Ian. Go ahead.
Who was this movie made for?
That
Because
was-
I have no goddamn idea. Because here's the thing is, I'm totally removing out of my mind for a moment the whole trial scene. I'm looking at it as simply a coming of age story. Like, I remember back in like when I was young in this great summer where I befriended the crazy guy next door who I thought was murdering people, and he ended up stabbing this guy
who was
by-
actually trying to murder us. Sure,
Yeah.
I get it.
and the trial scene just seems out of nowhere, and it seems like it doesn't know how to. I've never read To Kill a Mockingbird, so I can't claim on how the book was done. But this movie it doesn't know how to balance the hefty themes that it wants to deal with, while also telling a coming of age tale. And I don't think it worked. The clash of styles, especially when it just seems that right dab in the middle of this film, it switches to a completely different genre, and then switches back to a lighthearted coming of age tale almost, with a ham costume. Oh, but there's a murderer because of the trial scene that came before it, which seems out of place. It's just two movies smashed together, and I don't think it didn't. This is my big problem with the film. It didn't work for me.
Like, I get it. You're saying it was sort of jarring in that respect. And I was going to sort of challenge you, like, that's not quite style, but I do see what you mean. Like, where else to like, incorporate what you just said. So I completely get what you're saying. But I guess my view of it is I think it held together. I think by pure, like, filmography, I think it was well done. Even though you're saying that the tone, like, for you, wildly switches. I get it.
How can you say it's pure filmography? They smashed two movie genres together.
Yeah, but not to me. Like, I didn't feel that way.
Or they inserted. They cut a movie in
Right.
half and
As
inserted
I said,
the
you feel as if it's jarring, as if it's like randomly juxtaposed, like in a very off-putting way. I understand that. I understand that's what you're saying. I, though, did not feel that way. I think it all held together, even though I understand what you're saying as if they inserted like a random different genre. But it didn't affect me to that extent. I was not taken aback to that degree. And so because of that, because I was not affected.
But here's the thing: is I think here's the ultimate proof of that.
Okay.
After the trial scene concludes, when the body concluded in our discussion, all of us felt it was really weird that they started this other segment of the film, and at least Stephen Scott, you both of you commented along with me that it just seems like, why did they tack on this thing?
Like,
they
you're
didn't
right.
tack it on. They interrupted the plot line of the first movie
But-
to have a better movie, and then went back to the.
All right, I get it. And like as you yourself just admitted, you never read the novel, so like I knew that there was no way that wasn't going to happen because it was in the novel. Like it's a very like famous like part of it. So I get that. So I guess having like if you were a person who had not, you're right. You're judging it.
We went in
based on
say
the film.
we
I
agreed
get it.
back during The Martian.
You're right.
That you can't bring
I
outside
understand that.
material.
I'm just saying I knew they were going to have that. I wasn't sure how they're going to pull it off. I just didn't remember. So I don't think you're convincing me, but you make a very compelling argument, perhaps more compelling than I thought originally on the surface. But I think I still end up going to give this a, if not soft one, if not solid one, I'm sorry, then a soft one, but still a 1 at the end of the day, because I think it held together well enough for me. Versus your personal opinion, Ian. That's all.
I'm gonna give it a soft 1 as well. I think they could have done a better job of sort of giving us bits and pieces of Atticus at work before the trial. because really all we see of his legal work is him getting paid in barter by his clients, and I think it could have benefited from him sitting down and in the background of something Scout's doing, helping somebody draft their will, because at one point someone comments that he drafts wills that you can't, there's no ambiguity or any way to break it.
He has airtight abilities.
Yeah. And while that is an issue, it doesn't bother me to the extent it bothers you, Ian.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying.
So I'm giving it a soft one. I agree with everything you guys have said. I think the sound design was really good. I think this is so nitpicky, but there were a couple of issues with the transfer that Amazon has, where clearly a couple of scenes, like maybe they didn't have the original masters to draw from. So
that's not the movie's fault, though.
That's not the movie's fault in any way, shape, or form. It's just, I'm gonna be giving it a soft one.
Yeah, there were actually, Ian, when I went over to you on this question, I thought you were gonna talk about exactly what you talked about, like the fact that it seems like kind of two different movies were happening. And if I'm gonna take any points away from it, it would be for that. I'm glad that you mentioned the sound design, Jeff, because actually that was pretty good. Like the ambient sounds going on made you feel like there was a world going on around these characters, and they did a really good job with that. I don't know. I may side with you, Ian, on this one and give this a 0 because there was. I just think it's not a great transition between the first story, the trial, and then going back to the first story. I think that could have been smoother. So it's not that I didn't like the quote-unquote style of the movie. Like I said, the cinematography was good, the sound design was good.
But because of that...
I think that could have been done better. And I guess that goes into like a lot of how the narrative was written, really. But I don't think there's any other question on our scale that I can apply this to better than style. So I'm going to apply it there. I'm going to give it a 0. And that's going to move us on to...
Fair enough. Just, my final thought is you guys make a good point. I could have maybe gone on your side, but I think at the end I'm going to side where I said. But you do make a compelling argument together. So,
all right. That's going to move us on to recommendations. Scott, kick it off.
All right. So again, like maybe less clear-cut than I thought, but I think, I'm going to give it a 1 at the outset. And I suppose my reason is I still think it's important. It addresses important themes that are still relevant and pertinent to this day. That regardless of any other flaws or missteps, narratively or otherwise, that this movie may contain, I still think, like I said, and there's a reason why the novel is still like recognized as one of the greatest, most important novels, American novels written. And the film, I think, does a fairly good job of encapsulating at least the major components of that, and are still relevant. It's still, perhaps, people should see this film or anything like it that contains it. And I would say there are films that we said previously that, why is this on the AFI list? It could go away. This one, I think, does deserve to be in the AFI list. I'm not sure what number it is. If we said it, I can't remember offhand. But regardless, it is an important American film that I think should still be seen to this day. Like I said, regardless of any cracks or little, flaws that it may contain, I still think it deserves it, and I'm going to give it a 1 per recommendation.
In a way, I agree with you, Scott, that there are parts of this film that deserve to be seen.
See the courtroom scene, and then maybe you can sort of sleep for the rest.
As Jeff brought up earlier, there's a lot of context that goes into the rest of the film that makes the courtroom scene all the more impactful. Mm-hmm. But I think there are other movies that deal with these same issues better. I don't think that you should avoid this film, but nor would I put this on the top of my list. I really don't know how to judge it.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, should you see this movie? Sure. So I'm going to give it a 1, but I guess in a sense a soft 1. Yeah. If it's on, watch it, but watch a bunch of maybe 95 more of the AFI ones just before this one.
I'm definitely giving it a 1. I always enjoy this movie when I watch it, which is sadly not as much as I should have. if it's up to me, I will have a kid named either Atticus or Finch, maybe as a middle name. I don't know. I'll have to check with my significant other. But this isn't a perfect film. No film is perfect, but there is so much in here that's worthwhile. It is a little bit of a longer movie, but at the same time, I was entertained throughout. Even the parts where I was taken out of the film, I was still entertained because what took me out was that something was oddly humorous. Specifically, the ham costume was so entertaining that it's kind of one of those things that, even in its flaws, it's endearing. And so I'm absolutely giving it a strong one.
All right. I'm also going to give it a 1. It was a good movie. I mean, I've seen this before a couple of times, and I read the book at some point, but whatever. It's a movie that has its place in history.
Yes.
Deserves to be seen for that, and it is well acted, especially for an older flick. A lot of times you get these important movies,
like I said,
from the
Charlton
50s
Heston
and
effect.
60s that are overacted, or they're still important. They're good movies, but this one has Gregory Peck killing it throughout. So check it out. It's well worth the time. I'm gonna give it a 1.
Were you implying that Charlton Heston overacts?
Of course not. Never.
I thought he was saying that Heston being in a film elevates the film.
Well, in a different way.
Depends on the film.
All I'm
But
saying. Steve said you see films in which it's slightly over the top, and so Heston is the first thing that came to mind. Is all I'm saying.
Heston is quite the overact.
Yeah.
The ungodly actor.
Ungodly acting talent.
Obviously.
Anyway, let's go to Ian with the scores there.
Okay, so Jeff and Scott gave this a 9. Steven gave it a 8, and as usual, the curmudgeonly Ian
Old man Yule
of the group gave it a 6, which gives it an 8 overall.
I think that's about fair. Sure.
I'm happy
perfectly
with
fine.
It's a good score. I think that 8 is the perfect score because that's what I gave it.
All right, then. It's funny. I didn't think I was going to give it such a high score, but overall, I said what I said, and it stands, so.
Indeed. So before we go, I want to give Jeff a moment to give a shout out to whatever you've got going on right now.
Like I said, I host. Like I said in the previous episode that I was on. I'm the host of All Too Common Law, a podcast about news from a legal perspective, but for everybody to listen to. It's on hiatus at the moment because I'm preparing for a move. But I also want to plug an upcoming project that I'm doing with a law school friend of mine. Not to compete with you guys, but we're starting a movie review podcast specifically dealing with legal movies. We're still working on the title. It was going to be called Barely Legal Dudes. Thank you, Steve-O. But we pretty quickly learned that you can't. It's an ungoogleable title. Our podcast would be on page 150 of the results when you Google Barely Legal Dudes.
That is hilarious.
And nobody would get past that first page for one reason or another.
Right, you get distracted.
Well, Steve-O certainly wouldn't.
So at the moment, we're thinking we will probably call it Movie Justice.
Nice.
Once I get settled into my new place, hopefully late next month, we might have a few episodes go live. We will see, and I will keep you updated.
Nice.
Keep an eye out for that.
And we'll let you guys know if that happens as well, or when that happens as well. We'll post something for you guys and do a little cross promotion there. Anyway, thanks for joining us tonight. Geoff Blackwell, thank you.
Thank you.
Ian.
Good night.
Scott Thurlow.
And I will be rescuing children from knife-wielding yokels sometime soon.
Ian's last name is Manzer, by the way. I'm sorry to undercut your final thoughts there, Scott. And I'm Steve-O. Have a good night.
We hope you've enjoyed your stay.
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Join us again next time, won't you?
MOTSterpiece Theatre.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.
MOTSterpiece